and the former president and CEO of the People's College of Law in Los Angeles.
Sharon.
He's also a board member of the ACLU of Southern California. Sharon Kyle is also the publisher of the LA Progressive, a daily online publication that focuses on social justice issues. We'll be addressing issues of freedom of the press in the age of the internet.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like to correct a couple of things in my bio. I'm no longer the president of People's College of Law, and I am not a practicing attorney. But I was a law professor there and the president for 7 years, and currently I am the publisher of the LA Progressive, and I would like to talk about freedom of the press, although I have to say that just consuming what we've been consuming here in this past 45 minutes is shifting my thoughts about what I want to talk about, even though freedom of the press, well, as we all know, and I can tell by this audience, you know that the press is protected by the Constitution, and it in fact is the only enterprise that is mentioned in the Constitution, the press. But we also know that the Constitution is not self-enforcing, and so it is imperative that all of us have a deep understanding as to why the press is called the fourth estate and how the press, in fact, establishes the foundation that our democracy is built on. Unfortunately, I happen to be a member of a class of people who are accustomed to having our civil liberties violated and accustomed to not having our First Amendment rights protected. I'm being told to bring it down. Is that good? Thank you. So what we're seeing here with Julian Assange is the criminalization of the sharing of truth. That's nothing new in the United States. It's critical now because just last month, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists published the new doomsday account. The doomsday clock is set for 100 seconds till midnight. At no time in history have we ever been here. We have two existential threats to our continued existence on this planet: the nuclear threat and the global climate warming, which the right continues to deny is even a problem. So, someone asked me earlier when we were about to begin this program, is this going to be another program where we're all just preaching to the choir? And I said, yes, it is. And Steve asked, had people seen this documentary? And most of the audience raised their hands. Yes, they had seen it, and I've seen most of this footage myself. But I'd like to bring something more to the fore. Freedom of the press is essential, but just having the knowledge of violations of civil liberties themselves, that in and of itself has never changed anything. I once heard the president, maybe it was the executive director of Amnesty International, say that when he became the executive director, he believed that by sharing widely all of the kinds of abuses and torture and the terrible ways that human beings come up with treating other human beings, he thought that by letting people know that there would be a change. And sadly, he found there was no change. So while the freedom of the press is essential to a strong democracy and transparency is essential, there are other components that are essential that we're missing, I believe, as a progressive movement. And that is understanding the centrality of race. Now, for many years, I have come to this college, the law school of UCLA, and they conduct a series that Alvina is working with, which is called Critical Race Theory. Critical race theory talks about the nexus between empire and race. The nexus between these kinds of violations, civil liberties violations, and how the deep-pocketed, the elite, establish a stronghold in society. They glean their power by oppressing marginalized people. And then they'll start to oppress everyone else. So Lonnie Guinier, thanks sister. So Lonnie Guinier and Gerald Torres wrote a book called The Coal Miner's Canary, Enlisting Race, Resisting Power, and Transforming Democracy. And what I'm talking about and what they talk about is that they talk about the canary being a way to alert the miners of a poisonous atmosphere. Lonnie Guinier and Gerald Thomas say that black and brown communities, particularly black communities, are the canaries of our society. They say that like the canaries that alerted miners to a poisonous atmosphere, issues of race point to underlying problems in society that ultimately affect everyone, not just minorities. I was watching an interview between Noam Chomsky and Kathleen Cleaver, former Black Panthers member. And Noam Chomsky was doing a comparison between COINTELPRO and Watergate. And he said those two major events happened at approximately the same time. But you can pretty much ask any person on the street, have you ever heard of Watergate? And they'll say yes. If you ask them about COINTELPRO, I can guarantee you they're not going to know. Most of you probably know about COINTELPRO. What Noam Chomsky pointed out was the difference between the victims whose civil liberties were violated and why it mattered in one case and in the other case it didn't matter. And by allowing J. Edgar Hoover the kind of power that he had, I believe, for 40 years or more, he did just what was done to Julian Assange, to so many people, to Martin Luther King. So when Lonnie Guinier and Gerald Torres talk about the coal miner's canary, what they're saying is we have models. All we have to do is look, and you will see your own future. Sadly, we are at such a critical time. We just cannot afford to ignore this, and we cannot afford to continue what used to be state-sanctioned segregation, which is now socially sanctioned segregation. I look across this room, and I maintain that we still live segregated lives. All I have to do is drive down to Poveda Boulevard or across Wilshire, and I know that we live segregated lives. Ultimately, the lack of unity and the lack of a strong progressive movement, that will be the thing that will destroy us. So, I'll end on that happy note. But I will say, my husband over there, Dick, and you guys many of you know us, Dick and Sharon's LA Progressive. So, my husband and I are an example of how people can come together, very different kinds of people. He's from the Midwest, I'm from the projects in the Bronx. He's old, I'm not. There are so many differences between us, but when you make a commitment to make something work, you can. And I believe that we have the makings of a strong progressive movement. What is happening to Julian Assange is an example of what is more to come to the future, and I think that it's kind of telling that the Obama administration had debated about charging Assange under the Espionage Act, but they chose not to.
No, they just
And they chose not to because they thought that it would have a negative effect on investigative journalism. But I wonder if Trump is delving in because he's attempted to undo every single thing that Obama did.
Obama
So,
did nothing.
I'll close with that. Yes.
Thank you.
Jesus Christ.